Everybody dies, don't they? Everybody come back, don't they? Isn't that so?
You tried to get into the locked drawer today, didn't you?
How do the dead come back, Mother? What's the secret?
So my workflow is that first of all, I read a lot of stories. I source the stories. If I find a story that I like or is recommended, I will find a copy of it. And then I record it. And that can take any amount of time depending on how long the story is. As I said, Dracula took me 6 months. I ran quickly and lightly over the short stretch of rough grass between the graves towards the gap in the wall, and came out almost on the edge. Some of them, which are 15 minutes, take about 20 minutes to record because inevitably you make mistakes. So then, after I recorded it, my next part of the workflow is to edit it. So I spent some time
There is a mill by the Neckar
cutting out my mistakes.
to which many people resort for coffee.
There is a mill by the Neckar side. There's a mill. It is on the Mannheim, the flat and unromantic side of Heidelberg.
Happy-looking man whistled
I've got this little thing here, which you can't see, your DVX, which cuts out a lot of the breaths. But taking out breaths, it takes hours and hours and hours to do. When I do it through my main microphone, when I'm doing it for the podcast, this is my main microphone, which is a Rode Procaster. If I do it through the camera, which I've got a microphone on the camera, it isn't as good as that. I hadn't had the ability to cut out the noise from it to the same extent. And I've got a beautiful, lovely condenser microphone upstairs. Now, if I'm doing audiobooks, because I do audiobooks as well, I actually try and get the sound quality even better. So I use an expensive and beautiful microphone, and I do it in my closet for it to be quiet, and I use a different program. When I'm doing the podcast, I use Hindenburg Journalist Pro because I've got that at a discount. For when I'm doing audiobooks, I use Reaper, which is another station. Obviously, I make my videos in iMovie because I have thought about upgrading to a more professional program, but so far I don't think I've needed to do that.
If you want to see Scherer in a passion, just talk to him of the possibility of a French invasion.
Clicks here, they've got to go. We don't want clicks. So there we are. So what I do in the editing is I take out mistakes and repetitions. Now I may stumble over the words and so I have to take that out, or I may say it in a certain way and phrase it wrongly and I have to go and I want to take that out by preference, and that's a choice rather than a mistake, if you like, a stylistic thing. And I take the clicks out because my mouth makes clicks, and I try to take out as many breaths as possible because I know it's natural to breathe. And if you listen to the BBC, actually, their podcast, they leave a lot of their breaths in, but I kind of hear, now you are sensitized to my breathing. You will hear my breathing all the time, whereas maybe you didn't notice it before. So that is massively time consuming. There are little bits of software that can help you, but what they do is they remove the breath, but they impair the sound as well. They take the thuzz and cuzz and fuzz off as well because they're not smart enough to distinguish them. There are also gaps. Inevitably I cough. I may take a sip of tea, so I want to cut those out. Or an email pops up, or somebody knocks on my door, or so we have to take those out as well. And sometimes when you listen to it again, you think, I should have had a longer gap there. So I split it and add a second in, or half a second. Or sometimes the opposite, you think, I need to cut that. And one of the things I notice is I naturally talk quite fast. So with some stories, I put gaps in, the longer gaps. I artificially put the gaps in by splitting the sound and stretching it to make it slower. And then the final, not the final part, but the next part is you process the sound. And I don't use lots of processing modules. I don't use a de-esser, for example, which is to cut out the sibilance, because I find that also impairs the sound. I didn't used to use a compressor. I do now. A compressor basically if when you do an audiobook, people listen to that often with earphones and they get all, and you want the nuances of the speech. You want the quietness and the loudness and all of that kind of actorly stuff. I'm no actor, but you know. But with podcasts, and I got this from the guy who did Alice Isn't Dead and Welcome to Night Vale. I was listening to his podcast, and he says he compresses his stuff now. So what compression does is the opposite of that. So with an audiobook, you've got all the ups and downs, the quiet and the loud, all the subtlety. Now, with a lot of the stuff I do, taking my lead from him, he said, you know, people listen to this in the car, they listen to this while they're pounding on gym machines, they're out walking the dog, you know, so they're not getting all of this. And what they don't get is when you drop your voice, they can't hear you. So you'll see some of my earlier stuff isn't compressed and it goes up and down. And you hear this and you're and then we're saying it very quietly. I may go dramatically loud and then I trail off. And you don't hear it. So a compressor squeezes it. And you hear that on radio stations, they compress their stuff a lot. It's not nuanced, it's all there, and they squeeze the signal. And all of that gets an equal loudness. And that's what a compressor does. And then I use an equalizer that makes my voice sound nicer. So I can put a little bit of bass in it. And if there's a scratchy middle, or if it's muddy in the middle, I can do something about that. And I can cut the top off and cut the rumble off the bottom. But those are probably the only modules I use. And I probably use fewer modules now than I used to. Anyway, there you go. There's an insight into it. But all of this takes ages, and now I've discovered videos. I'm having to learn how to make videos as well, and all the camera tricks and things like that. So it is what is it? The work has grown to fill the time available and more so. But if I didn't like it, I wouldn't do it. So no, I love it. I love it, and I love learning about all these things and getting better at it. So hopefully you stay with me on the journey. And in 2 or 3 years' time, when I will be quite an old man, my videos and audio will be absolutely wonderful. And you'll listen to the early stuff and think, oh, how could we have even listened to that? I mean, actually, if you go and listen to, there's E.F. Benson's A Room in the Tower, and you listen to the audio on that and compare it to something like The Grey Woman, which I've just done, or I'm just doing, that was what that was. I hope you can hear the difference. And if you look back at my early videos and this one and then future ones, and you can compare them. Anyway, lovely talking to you. Okay.
Everybody dies, don't they? Everybody come back, don't they? Isn't that so? Isn't that so? Isn't that so? Isn't that so?